Chapter 1. Alright, so listen up. There was this emperor, right? Name's Nathaniel Klein, but everyone just calls him Nate. And the guy was like insanely powerful. The 17th Holy Emperor of Delcross, had literal divine power, was the best swordsman on the continent. The country was thriving under him, and he was on good terms with all the neighbours. Basically, a once-in-a-century kind of ruler. Except, there was one little problem. His nickname was the unprecedented, womanizing Holy Emperor. Because by the time he was 21, when he first sat on the throne, he already had 3 wives, 1 mistress, and 5 kids. After 12 years of ruling, over 7 legitimate children, and who knows how many illegitimately ones. So how do you shake off a label like that? You don't. And Nate's been struggling ever since, trying to be a decent dad. But kids, man, they're a whole other level of pain. Take his oldest son, Owen. The kid starts spewing nonsense out of nowhere. He goes, "Father, I want to level up my stats through a status window." And then he just pieces out to the southern front. What are you even supposed to do with that? Then there's his daughter, Amelia. She drops a whole bombshell, comes in crying and says she came back from the future. Apparently, some guy named Leonard tricked her into marriage, then abused her, locked her in a tower, and eventually killed her. So now she wants revenge, full on, to the bitter end. Nate looks at his sweet little daughter, who suddenly turned into a thorny rose, and thinks, what kind of parenting is this? Is it like this for everyone? Or are my kids just weird? But the real headache is his 4th child, Prince Morres. His mom is a hysterical mess who constantly nagged him, trying to turn him into the heir. And what did Morres do in response? He started fooling around with the palace staff and eventually turned into an out-of-control delinquent. Basically, the family's biggest embarrassment. Then the kid almost dies from some fever, wakes up, and he's like a completely different person. Stopped causing trouble, started training non-stop, lost weight, his swordsmanship got way better, but his personality turned sharp and cold. Nate's happy about the changes, sure, but something's just off. And then one day, this happens. Boom! The whole palace shakes. Everyone runs outside to the courtyard, and there's a freaking dragon. A real one. A massive black corpse with rotting flesh and demonic energy radiating off it. And guess who's standing right on top of it? Morres, cool as a cucumber. And he says, didn't mean to cause a commotion. Carry on with your duties, don't mind me. So, get this. He'd apparently taken down this demonic dragon somewhere in the east, and instead of dragging it across the country, risking everyone and everything getting infected by its corpse, he just brought it here. Dumped it right in the middle of the imperial palace, where the emperor lives, where all the ministers are walking around. The cardinals are in shock. The knights are crossing themselves. Even the high priest swears under his breath. Everyone's thinking the same thing. This good-for-nothing prince has turned into a complete madman. You never know what he'll do next. And the dragon, by the way, still alive? Barely. It's roaring, twitching, demonic energy flaring up everywhere, and Morres is standing right in the middle of this nightmare. He pulls out his sword, and suddenly, this creepy, dark red aura starts leaking from the blade. Definitely not the kind of aura you'd expect from a prince of a holy empire. "I'll handle this now," he says. "You guys stay back. Be careful with the energy." And then he just stabs the dragon right through its heart. Explosion. Black smoke everywhere. Total chaos. Thankfully, Emperor Nate manages to throw up a holy barrier to stop the magic from wiping out everyone nearby. After a while, the smoke clears, and all that's left of the dragon is a white skeleton. But where's the prince? Everyone thinks he's toast. A normal person with no holy power would have just disintegrated from that much demonic energy. But nope, Morres walks out of the smoke, totally fine, not a scratch, and he walks straight toward his father, still radiating that twisted blood-red aura. Honestly, at this point, you'd be confused about who's the demon and who's the prince. The archbishop, shaking like a leaf, whispers to the emperor, "Your Majesty, are you absolutely sure your son isn't involved with something unholy?" Nate just puts a hand over his face and sighs quietly. Because his reckless idiot son Morres just became the center of a brand new storm. And this storm? Yeah, it's probably going to turn all of Delcross upside down. Chapter 2. So here's the deal with Morris Klein, third prince of the Holy Empire of Delcross. And let's just say, he's a complete joke. The kind of embarrassment to the imperial family you don't see every day. Unlike his father, who was basically the coolest emperor in history, this guy didn't inherit a single shred of holy power or any swordsmanship skills. On top of that, his temper was explosive, his language was crude, nothing like his dad's calm manners, and it was so bad that some bishops even whispered like, "Are we sure he's actually the emperor's kid?" But then, this forever idiot prince suddenly got a chance to change. He caught a nasty fever, spent 3 days and 3 nights at death's door, and when he woke up, he was a completely different person. Everyone just thought, well, people change after a near-death experience. But here's the thing, the prince had a huge secret, because the one who opened his eyes inside Morris's dying body was a guy named Lee Sungjin, from Earth. This Lee Sungjin guy had been stubborn since he was a baby, like, since diapers. His parents, even though he was their only child, went through a lot with him. His mum cried watching her 4-year-old son still glued to his pacifier. She was worried about his teeth, but luckily, his baby teeth grew in straight and nice. Then he started kindergarten, and a new problem popped up. The kid flat out refused to go home. They tried everything. We've got snacks at home. Let's watch your favourite cartoon. Nothing worked. The teachers even started to suspect something was wrong at home. In the end, mum or dad had to carry him around the playground until he fell asleep, then drag him home late at night. Then came elementary school. His parents finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thought he'd matured. Yeah, not really. One day he came home with someone else's crayons. The next day, the teacher called. Sung Jin had taken a 56-pack from a classmate because that classmate had broken his own 24-pack of crayons. His mum said, "Sung Jin, he apologised. You can't just take other people's things." He said, "So if he apologises, that's it? What about my crayons? We'll buy new ones. Why should you buy them if Hyunchul broke them? The person who caused the problem should take responsibility." His mum was speechless, but from a kid's point of view, he wasn't wrong. Eventually, she talked him into it. Friendship is more important than crayons. Forgive him first, and if you're still upset, we'll figure it out later. He reluctantly nodded, then added, "And why did I take the 56-pack? For emotional damages. I should get something better, right?" His mum never figured out if her son was a genius or just really clever. Then middle school came, and Sungjin suddenly went quiet. His parents watched him nervously, but his uniform was neat. His textbooks were fine. No one seemed to be bullying him. They thought finally he's grown up. The truth was, things were a total mess behind the scenes. He'd just learned to hide his business from teachers and parents. For example, some bullies tried to mess with him. He spent 3 months methodically hunting down one of them until the bullies were shaking in their shoes and begged for a truce. Or one time, a student council member picked a fight with him. Sungjin stalked him for a week until the guy developed social anxiety and went on medical leave. So yeah, his school life was quite the adventure, always walking the line between justice and crime. He wasn't a star student, but he was diligent enough. Got into a decent university in Seoul, did his military service, landed a job at a decent small to mid-sized company. Some co-workers said, "You know, there's something off about that Mr. Lee." But on the outside, he was a model employee. He even got job offers and started flirting with a female co-worker. In other words, he would have just lived a normal life, gotten married and been fine. Then came August 2035. The Gehenna Gate incident. Portals to the demon world suddenly opened all over the planet, and hordes of monsters poured out. Cities crumbled within days. The world fell into chaos. Sungjin happened to be on a business trip and barely survived by hiding in a shelter on the defense line. But he lost everything. His family, his peaceful life, everything. And he didn't cry. He just quietly watched the endless stream of monsters and thought, who do I collect this debt from? So he became a hunter, a professional monster killer. Turns out if you touch a monster's corpse, your body absorbs this strange energy. They called it monster aura. And the people who absorbed it gained superhuman abilities. Some got incredibly strong, some developed a tough outer shell, and some could even move things with their minds. The more you absorbed, the stronger you got. Pretty soon, there were superhumans who could kill thousands of monsters by themselves. Humanity slowly started pushing back, and a war of attrition began, one that lasted for decades. And ironically, after decades, the demon world and Earth had nearly destroyed each other. When the last squad of superhumans finally reached the Demon King, hiding deep in the heart of the demon world, he just sighed and said, "So it's come to this. What have we been doing for decades? What a disgrace." Nobody cared about his disappointment. There was only one option left: total annihilation of one side. The Demon King fought back desperately. They battled for 3 days and 3 nights. By the 3rd night, all that was left of the Demon King was his head. And out of the entire human squad, only one person was still alive. It was Sungjin, the stubborn bastard who never gave up. He barely raised his fist in front of the Demon King's head, and the Demon King said with a tired kind of surprise, "You stubborn piece of work. I thought you were the least interesting of them all, but here I am, dying at your hands." Sungjin smirked and threw a punch. Crack! A crack ran through the Demon King's horn. Another punch, and his nose caved in. But Sungjin didn't have enough strength left to smash his head completely. The Demon King, bleeding from his nose, panicked. "Hey, wait! Hold on!" Sungjin just kept punching methodically. At some point, Sungjin ran out of gas and stopped to catch his breath. And then he watched as the Demon King's crushed nose slowly started to heal. Turns out even just ahead, this demon could regenerate. The Demon King started negotiating. "Let's call a truce, recover our strength, and then fight again." But Sungjin knew, if both of them recovered, he was screwed. Because he was human, and the Demon King was the Demon King. So the Demon King tried a different angle. "Fine, let's just stop fighting altogether. I'll leave Earth and Gehenna forever. You save my life, and you save both worlds. Think about it." Sungjin stayed quiet. "If you kill me like this, Gehenna collapses, and Earth gets slowly dragged into the gates. Both worlds die." "Is that what you want?" Sungjin finally answered. "I don't care about either world. The only thing that matters is whether I kill you or not. That's the whole point." The Demon King went pale. He realized there was no negotiating with this guy. Then he tried a third pitch. "At least let me die on my own terms. My auto-regeneration is draining me. Give me some time and I'll burn my own soul with Gehenna's flame. I'll disappear on my own. You won't have to lift a finger, and I'll close the gates. Earth will be fine." Sungjin nodded. "Okay, I'll think about it after I kill you." The Demon King screamed, "How are you going to think about it after I'm dead? And you can't even kill me like this anyway. Why am I even talking to you?" Who knows how long this would have gone on. But at some point, the Demon King finally made up his mind. He started sobbing and yelled, You cursed brat, I really didn't want to do this." Crimson flames erupted. Gehenna's fire, the stuff that erases existence itself. It started consuming the Demon King's head, and then spread to Sungjin. The Demon King, laughing through his tears, shouted, "Burn together with this Demon King's noble soul as fuel. I will destroy you. I'll burn your soul to ash." His flesh was melting, his bones were showing, but even then he seemed almost happy that he was dragging Sungjin down with him. And Sungjin looked at his own burning body, the body that had absorbed monster aura for decades, that had become nearly invincible, and realized it was melting like wax, and it hurt like hell, even though he was used to pain. But he knew one thing: the one who started this invasion, the enemy of his entire life, was finally defeated. Then the Demon King, who had been laughing like a maniac, suddenly stopped, because he saw that Sungjin, engulfed in flames, was smiling. and a chill ran down the Demon King's spine. "Well," Sungjin said, "I guess this is it for me too." Then he slowly, with muscles that were nothing but charred skeletons, raised his burning fist. "So let's finish this with one last punch," the Demon King shrieked. "You bastard, even now? Think of this as compensation for emotional damages." "Crack!" the scream cut off. The Demon King's face crumbled into ash. Sungjin closed his eyes. In his fading consciousness, he thought he heard a cracking sound, like something breaking. That was the last memory of Hunter Lee Sungjin. So yeah, this was supposed to be the end. But nope, Sungjin wakes up and has no idea what the hell is going on. He was sure he'd burned even his own soul in that fire, and now he's lying in bed, and someone's spoon-feeding him porridge. And in his head, that damn Demon King, the same one who solemnly swore to burn his own soul to ashes. And now he's in there, being noisy and laughing his arse off. "Ha ha ha! This is hilarious. Are you a baby? What are you even going to do with that bib?" "It's a napkin, you idiot. Anyway, let's rewind to a day earlier." Sungjin opens his eyes and sees some mature woman in fancy clothes. She's got tears in her eyes. "Morres, my baby, do you recognize your mother?" "Oh, your highness, you've finally come around." "What?" Sungjin just blinks, completely confused. The room is gorgeous, there are servants everywhere. At first he thinks, maybe this is the afterlife? But then a familiar voice sounds in his head. "Hey, stop spacing out, wake up. Are you still sleeping or what?" "Demon King? Oh, you recognized me. You weren't opening your eyes, I thought your soul had completely fallen apart. Do you have any idea how strong that flame was?" Sungjin is furious. "What do you mean?" He finished him off. Whoa, calm down. Your soul hasn't fully settled into this body yet. If you lose it now, you might get kicked back out, got it? Sungjin tries to get up to deal with this bastard once and for all, but his body feels weirdly sluggish and heavy. He collapses back down. Breathing is hard, arms and legs are too heavy. Everyone around starts panicking. "Morres, what's wrong? Are you in pain?" And he's trying to break free, yelling that the Demon King is still alive and needs to be finished. And the Demon King in his head goes, "Hey, your blood pressure just spiked. If you keep this up, you'll die just as fast as you were reborn. Come on, breathe, in and out, in and out." Sungjin keeps struggling, and then, bam, sharp pain in his back, and his vision goes dark. When he comes to again, he's in the same place, surrounded by the same people, and that damned voice in his head is back. "Wow, I thought you just had a short temper, but it seems your anger really is out of control." "Shut up, you bastard." The Demon King quickly changed his tone. Okay, sorry. No more teasing. Let's just talk, all right?" Sungjin, strangely enough, calmed down pretty quickly. Because he learned one important thing. The Demon King's physical body is completely destroyed, and only a tiny fragment of his soul remains. Just a voice without a body. Getting angry at that is just a waste of energy. The Demon King explained that in that final battle, Gehenna's fire burned them both. Sungjin's body was completely incinerated, but his soul somehow remained intact. The Demon King, on the other hand, lost almost all his power and went from that mighty ruler to a pathetic little leftover. Sungjin asked, "So why are you in my head then? Just disappear already." The Demon King sighed. "I tried, but every time I try to move away from you, the holy energy around here starts burning me. It's so painful that even the remaining fragments of my soul might completely crumble." Sungjin, of course, would have liked to finish him off even in this state, but how do you kill something with no physical form? It's not like he can summon Gehenna's fire just by snapping his fingers. On the other hand, this annoying voice turned out to be pretty useful. The former Demon King really does know a lot. He woke up a day earlier than Sungjin and already gathered information about this new world by directly touching the souls of the people around him and reading their memories. Here's what he found out. This place is a completely different dimension, far from Earth and the demon world, a higher level. "We got incredibly lucky," said the Demon King. "We could have just scattered into the void, but somehow we ended up in a main world." And what's a main world? A higher dimension, at least a couple levels above things like Sigurd 34 or Gehenna. Sungjin didn't understand half the terms, but decided not to dwell on it. Anyway, this place is called the Holy Empire of Delcross, a powerful empire with lots of kingdoms and duchies ruled by the Holy Emperor who receives the protection of the gods, generation after generation. The current Holy Emperor is the 17th, and he's the biological father of the body Sungjin ended up in, which means Lee Sungjin is now a prince. No wonder everyone around is so polite. Your name now is Morres Klein, the third prince and fourth child of the Holy Emperor. You turn 15 this year. 15? A child and a famous troublemaker. His mother is the first queen, Elizabeth Ussen, daughter of a highly respected archduke, the most high-born woman in the palace. From childhood, she was certain that her son, with the most noble blood among all the royal children, would become the crown prince and inherit the throne. And that expectation turned into crazy parenting zeal and emotional pressure. As a kid, Morres tried to live up to his mother's expectations. It wasn't like he was more talented than the others, but at least he roughly behaved like a prince. But from age 7, things went to hell. He started losing his temper for no reason, using his impunity. He'd snap at the servants, constantly commit unprovoked violence, break things, bully his escort knights. In class, he'd insult the teachers, and after the Queen scolded him a few times, he stopped going to lessons altogether. The Demon King recounted all this as if he were talking about Sungjin's own disgrace. Sungjin asked, "How do you have such detailed information after just one day? Can I even trust this? I directly connected to the souls of the people around you. This is top quality info you couldn't have gathered in a lifetime on your own. Be grateful." After that, the prince's life hit rock bottom completely. He even gave up swordsmanship, the only thing he somewhat enjoyed. He'd lie in bed all day and eat non-stop. People couldn't understand why he'd changed so much. They could only guess that the young prince who'd obediently followed his ambitious mother might have just cracked under the stress. Over the years, the once noble prince turned into an ignorant, impatient pig, rolling around on the ground from severe obesity. And then he suddenly got sick. 3 days ago, Morres ate a good dinner, went to bed, and at dawn he suddenly developed a mysterious fever. And by noon he'd lost consciousness. No sign of poisoning, nothing like any normal illness. The royal doctors couldn't do anything. The emperor put aside his duties and came to visit. The queen spent the whole night at his bedside in tears. And after 4 days of fever, the one who woke up in this body wasn't Morres, it was Sungjin. Sungjin asked, "So where did Morris's original soul go? We've basically hijacked someone else's body." The Demon King answered casually, When I woke up, there were no other souls in this body besides us. Maybe he died from the fever? So they just took over the body of someone who just died from illness. What if we try to leave? Why leave? Without a soul, the body will just die. Want to try? Is there any way to get out? The Demon King said brutally. Sure, just die and that's it. Sungjin looked grim. On one hand, coming back to life wasn't the worst feeling. He'd already been ready for annihilation in that battle with the Demon King, and the feeling that he'd destroyed the demon world, even with leftover junk, was enough for him. But now he was awake. His past life, full of suffering and hardship, didn't look so appealing anymore, constantly grinding himself down to destroy a terrible world. Not exactly a fun time. And now, could he start a new life in someone else's body? Could this be considered compensation for everything he'd been through? While Sungjin was lost in thought, the Demon King, who didn't understand his complicated feelings at all, poked fun at him from the side. Anyway, who cares if you're a pig? You became the son of the most powerful guy in the country. Congratulations, you hit the jackpot. And that was also a problem. Sungjin swallowed hard and looked at his massive body, sprawled across the bed. His belly was so big that even lying down, it blocked his view. His arms and legs were swollen with fat. His joints wouldn't bend properly. He was out of breath and tired just from closing his eyes for a second. And that wasn't just from the fever. He'd have to exist in this worthless body. Sungjin sighed, remembering his old body with its powerful muscles. That's what happened in one day. And now he's lying on a fancy bed. Queen Elizabeth is spoon-feeding him porridge like a baby bird, with a napkin neatly tied around his neck. Come on now, Morres. Say ah one more time. He was shamefully close to losing it, but seeing this caring queen, Sungjin reluctantly opened his mouth again. And just then, a half-choked laughing voice rang out in his head. Ha 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 ha! I'm losing it! You want me to die of laughter? Ha 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 ha! Sungjin thought, one day I will get rid of you. He swallowed the porridge roughly and stopped the queen as she was about to scoop up another spoonful. Mom? My stomach's full, you must be tired. You can stop feeding me. The queen looked at him for a moment with some kind of sad expression, then lowered her head and wiped her tears with her fancy lace sleeve. You know, I suddenly noticed your memory's a bit off. You've never called me Mom before. God, this is so awkward. To avoid raising suspicion, he said his memory was a little foggy after the illness, but every conversation with the queen was pure stress, afraid he'd slip up. The Demon King gave him a tip. Looks like you usually called her Queen Mother. Sungjin knew that, but so what? Out loud, all he managed was, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? That fever of yours was just terrible. Even the Emperor himself came to treat you, but the fever wouldn't go down. As a mother, I was afraid something terrible had happened. The Queen delicately adjusted her sleeve and gently took Morris's hand. The fact that you woke up alive and well is more than enough to make me happy. When her warm hand touched his, Sungjin had to make an effort not to flinch. He felt terribly guilty for pretending to be her son. Her real son was already dead, his soul gone, and she didn't even know. She couldn't even mourn him, but he couldn't just tell her the truth, that there was a different soul inside Morris's body. First of all, she wouldn't believe him, and second, if she did believe him, then what? Throw him out? And if his soul actually got kicked out of the body? Sungjin didn't particularly cling to his life, but he wasn't looking to commit suicide in such a spectacular way either. All eyes wide, but it seems there's a good side to you getting sick. My child sitting calmly with me like this. When was the last time that happened? Ha ha ha. Sungjin just smiled awkwardly. This crazy prince, how badly did you have to live that your mother rejoices over such small things? The body, which had already started showing signs of recovery, quickly got better. Porridge was replaced with normal food, and the range of allowed activities gradually expanded. Meanwhile, Sungjin spent his free time doing various exercises in his room. He wanted to run outside and do some high-intensity cardio right away, but he knew that with his physical condition, which had hit rock bottom after the illness, that was impossible. Besides, if I move too vigorously right now, it feels like my joints are going to pop out. Just doing basic calisthenics makes his knees shake. Standing exercises are also tough, and if he tries to run with this weight, his cartilage won't hold up. Is there a pool anywhere around here? He wanted to train like he was in rehabilitation. While he was clumsily moving his arms and legs, partially leaning on the bed to avoid straining his body too much, the Demon King was comforting him and talking nonsense. Well, it's still better than the first day, right? Looks like your facial features are starting to show a bit. Sungjin looked in the mirror. A huge blonde boy with a gloomy expression approached him. Greyish blonde hair, somewhat fierce eyes, very similar to Queen Elizabeth. Despite the excess weight, he seemed pretty tall for a 15-year-old, but Sungjin didn't know the average height around here, so that was just a guess. I don't see any changes. Isn't that just a little less swelling? We've got to start somewhere, with a positive attitude, don't we? Maybe if you work hard, you'll turn from a pig into a handsome guy. Now go get him. I just want to destroy him. Sungjin shook his head and went back to his exercises. The separate palace where Sungjin was staying was a beautiful ivory-coloured building called the Pearl Palace. From the outside, it looked simply elegant and neat, but if you looked closely, It was a fine villa filled with luxurious and colourful decorations. They said the first queen built it specifically for Morres, so it was clearly no ordinary building. It had everything a prince needed for studying and social activities. Small but luxurious bedrooms, a private study, a private training ground, a private conservatory, and a private banquet hall. Sungjin planned to visit the training ground and the library sooner or later, but while observing his surroundings for a few days, as he regained his strength, Sungjin noticed some strange things about the Pearl Palace. First, none of the people who lived in or visited the palace possessed divine power. This was very strange. The entire imperial palace was filled with divine energy, but the source of this energy was invisible. I'm sure there's so much divine power around that the Demon King can't leave this body without permission. But in reality, Sungjin hadn't encountered anyone who had divine power since he ended up in this body. Morris's own body was no exception. The current Holy Emperor, Nathaniel, possessed immense divine power, but Morres, son of the most ambitious first queen, unfortunately wasn't born with even a shred of that power. Well, that was very fortunate for Sungjin and the Demon King. If Morris's body had even a drop of divine power, the Demon King would have vanished the moment he entered this body. Oh, what a loss. I could have finished him off for good. You bastard! You think you would have done it yourself? You're an evil spirit who willingly possessed a prince's body. If a priest had detected you, wouldn't you have been exorcised on the spot? He had a point. That could have been a problem. Anyway, the Holy Empire of Delcross had a stable theocratic system, and its influence spread across the continent. In other words, people with divine power gathered here, from all over the continent. But the Pearl Palace only had ordinary people without divine power. Could that be a coincidence? There wasn't even a regular healer in sight, which was very strange considering the precious prince had just come back to life. The Demon King cautiously guessed the reason. Maybe it's because Morres himself doesn't have divine power? So what? Think about his reputation. Even though he's the son of the Holy Emperor, they say he has no divine power. With that kind of personality, he'd definitely freak out just seeing other people use it. Maybe he went overboard because of an inferiority complex. That sounded plausible, but was it the only reason? Hey, that's great then. Let's just stay here. Isn't that better for us? Divine power users are especially sensitive to demonic aura and evil spirits. We could live without fear of getting caught. How good is that? Wait a minute. But Morris's father has divine power, doesn't he? How can a prince avoid his father if they live in the same palace? Yeah, so the final boss is your father? Sungjin sighed, feeling the Demon King tremble. I don't know either. Whatever happens, happens. Second, the servants at the Pearl Palace were kind of strange. The palace was managed by a small number of servants. Except for the minimal security, compared to the size of the palace, there were very few people there. One lady in waiting, 2 maids, a housekeeper, a cook, and 1 low-level administrative official. Even Queen Elizabeth, who sometimes visited Sungjin, was accompanied by nearly 20 attendants and escort knights. And even these few servants were unusual. Take Edith, the only lady in waiting. A young woman with short hair and delicate features, she walked around the palace with a somewhat clueless expression on her face, which didn't suit an imperial court lady at all. Every time she came into Sungjin's room alone, he thought she must have been through a lot at such a young age, because of such a tough job. But this woman turned out to be unusual. The moment Sungjin made the smallest gesture, she'd fly into the room or carry huge trays of food all by herself. Imagine his surprise when she lifted Morres's massive body with her slender arms to change his sweat-soaked sheets. At first, he even suspected she was a hired assassin, pretending to be a maid. His hunter's intuition, honed by decades of fighting demons, told him this woman might be on par with many knights. At first, he thought everyone here was like that, but no, even the first queen was just a fragile woman who grew up as an ordinary person, and her ladies-in-waiting who accompanied her were also just women with normal bodies. Skilled servants, yes, but still physically ordinary. So why was Morris's personal attendant so special? Edith, where do you get such strength? Edith, who was opening the curtains to air out the room, quickly bowed her head and answered, Yes, Your Highness, it's because I use aura. Maybe because of the Queen's strong influence, she remained polite even to a prince with a terrible reputation. She was just thinking to herself, What does this pig-like prince want now first thing in the morning? Added the Demon King, who liked to peek into people's souls and run his mouth. Sung Jin, slightly embarrassed, cleared his throat. An aura user? Yes, Your Highness. Aura is said to be the fundamental force of life, evenly distributed throughout the world. Those who consciously gather and use it on their bodies are called aura users. Thanks to his supposedly imperfect memory after the illness, Edith answered without suspicion. If a person undergoes aura initiation and is deemed worthy, they can take the entrance exam to become an Imperial Palace Knight. So you, Edith, are also... Yes, I also entered the palace first as a squire, hoping to join the Royal Guard. A squire? So a knight in training? Sung Jin's doubts grew. What was a normal aspiring knight doing at the Pearl Palace? Well, Edith glanced at Sung Jin and continued cautiously. In the past, Your Highness treated the servants somewhat harshly. In short, as Morris's terrible behaviour worsened, injuries and complaints from the servants never stopped. The first queen tried her best to stop it, but it was impossible to hide the fact that people were suffering every day. And news reached the Holy Emperor's ears. Can't handle it. Then hire people the prince can't accidentally hurt. The Holy Emperor transferred most of the servants from the Pearl Palace to other places, and hired a few highly paid ones. High wages were offered to those who could handle aura, and those with skills above the squire level. At first people thought no one would apply. No matter how high the salary, finding a maid for such a terrible prince among those who came to the capital dreaming of becoming noble imperial knights was no easy task, but the Holy Emperor said without much concern, there must be at least one. And as expected, there are exceptions everywhere. Edith, who arrived in the capital at just the right time, with no connections and only her aura user skills, showed up around then. I passed the entrance exam, but from the very bottom, it was hard to make it as a knight. And so was born the strongest maid, one who could catch a thrown plate with her quick reflexes, easily dodge if a weapon was thrown at her, and fillet a fish with an aura-infused knife. The more Sung Jin listened to her explanation, the more confused he got. Where did it all go wrong? Was all the Demon King said. On one hand, Morres was so terrible that the only servants who could survive around him were those who could use aura. On the other hand, the Holy Emperor, who came up with the idea of replacing everyone with aura users, wasn't exactly stable either. But the strangest of all was Edith, who got caught up in all this and became the exceptional maid. But Your Highness, Edith suddenly raised her eyes to Sung Jin and tilted her head. Are you all right? What do you mean? Before, if you heard even the slightest talk about aura, you'd get very angry. Angry? You'd throw things all over the palace. The more Sung Jin learned about Morres, the more of a jerk he realised the guy was. Why throw things over such nonsense? Are you a child or something? Sung Jin opened his mouth, but couldn't find anything to say. Sorry. Edith's eyes widened. She looked surprised. Apparently, she hadn't expected an apology from the prince. Then she smiled and shook her head. It's all right, Your Highness. Besides, it was quite fun catching flying dishes. Sung Jin looked at Edith, who quietly lowered her head with a sympathetic expression, and said to the Demon King, She's probably a little crazy too. I know. By the way, this could be considered a realization, Sung Jin thought deeply. Seeing that aura, divine power, and other concepts from fantasy novels actually existed, he realized once again that this was a completely different world. Of course, Sung Jin's own world, where demon gates opened and a war with monsters raged, was also pretty fantastical. But at least that was a straightforward fight for survival. Hunters got stronger by absorbing monster spirits, and sometimes people with telekinesis appeared. Demons too. Some could generate flames or use poison, but most just smashed things with brute force. So until the Demon King tried to burn his soul with Gehenna's flame, Sungjin couldn't even imagine that such incredible forces could exist. That's because the Sigurd 34 sector was such a lower dimension. The fact that you're not familiar with these forces proves it was a low-level world where aura and divine power just weren't a thing. Don't call it low-level. And why are you leaving out Gehenna? You said it was from the same sub-dimension as Earth. You think all lower worlds are the same? Gehenna is a little different. Right when we were about to make a big leap, you people got in the way. What? The fury in Sungjin's voice made the Demon King quickly change the subject. Ahem. Anyway, lower flame worlds usually have limited spiritual abilities or mind-related abilities. It seems the concept itself is connected to the main world, but there's no way to manifest its power. Sungjin blinked. What's an ordinary world? Here we go, the bastard's making that stupid face again. Oh, you ignorant earthling. Dimensions, right? Big stuff, yeah? They're divided into main world, ordinary worlds, and imaginary worlds. You didn't know that? Why is this bastard starting again? What difference does it make? 3 dimensions or 4? Is that important right now? Just as Sungjin started to get angry, the Demon King's voice turned ingratiating. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't. Let's get back on track. So how do I use aura? Sungjin felt a strong interest in the possibility of a new power. He'd originally been a successful hunter, able to surpass human limits, and now he was stuck in such a worthless body. If there were no monsters in this world and he couldn't get his hunter powers back, maybe becoming an aura user was the way to go. I don't know either, because our world is different from this one. If I were to explain it using your Earth understanding, it's like the difference between hydroelectric power and nuclear power. The principles here are completely different. Even the Demon King, who acted like he knew everything, didn't know this. What do you know? This body is the body of a Demon King, the ruler of a dimension. It's strong enough even without that, snorted the Demon King, the very one Sungjin had beaten to a pulp. Was Morres an aura user in the past? Sungjin asked. Divine power seemed to be innate, but aura could be trained, right? He didn't feel any special energy in this body that he could call aura, but it couldn't be that rare. Even a maid could use it, not to mention the knights. But Morres' uselessness exceeded all of Sungjin's expectations. The Demon King, who seemed to have briefly touched Edith's soul and found out a few things, sighed. It seems the difference in achievement depends on talent. There are people who can't feel aura no matter how much they train, and there are talented people who use it like breathing from childhood. Unfortunately, Morres is clearly the former. What in the world did the first queen believe in to make this guy her heir? Sungjin sighed. Maybe I should just focus on physical training for now. Don't hang your head. Life is fundamentally unfair. You have to fight for your existence. Shut up! While Sungjin was doing exercises in the corner of his room, slowly getting used to his new life, rumours started spreading throughout the imperial palace that the prince had become kind of strange. The Pearl Palace, which used to never be quiet because of loud cursing and the sound of breaking objects, had been as calm as a windless lake for several days. At first, even those who thought he just didn't have the strength to cause trouble after being sick gradually began to notice the changes in the prince. I hear he's not even complaining about the food. Before he'd flip the table more often than not. Before he'd constantly fuss about wanting snacks. But these days, he doesn't ask for any at all. And the amount he eats has gone down a lot too. The servants, who had been keeping their mouths shut because of the queen and had been extremely cautious, started gathering in little hidden spots to whisper among themselves as their peaceful daily life continued. Why is he so calm? I'm just waiting for something to explode. They say his memory still isn't fully back. People don't change that easily. Once he recovers, he'll be back to his old self soon enough. They say people do change. He had such a high fever. Maybe his head really did get a little messed up. Shh, are you crazy? What if someone hears? And all these rumours reached the head chamberlain, through the many eyes and ears spread throughout the imperial palace. "How strange," said Head Chamberlain Louis, after listening to the servants' reports, resting his chin on his hand and thinking. "They say it's not uncommon for a person's personality to completely change after a high fever or injury," one servant suggested. But Louis silently shook his head. The change in Prince Morres was certainly surprising and welcome. But the head chamberlain was more concerned about how the Holy Emperor was reacting than how the prince had changed. He had been by the young Holy Emperor's side since he ascended the throne. He knew well how diligently the Emperor had managed the Pearl Palace without allowing any changes. The staff was personally appointed by the Emperor, the number of visitors was strictly limited, and even the manager was chosen through the Emperor's personal review of applications. And yet, the Emperor was calmly observing his suddenly changed son without making any comments. That was quite strange. The unexpected fever was the cause of the change, but wouldn't it be too presumptuous to think that even that was within his master's control? It's time for Prince Morris's audience, Louis decided. He should visit the prince himself and take a closer look. He stroked his clean-shaven chin and made up his mind. "Did you sleep well?" "Yeah, fine." After Edith, the person Sungjin saw most often was the resident doctor of the Pearl Palace, an elderly physician named Ninius. He was so dishevelled that it was hard to call him a member of the imperial court. Whenever he opened his mouth, he reeked of alcohol, and his red nose made him look like a classic alcoholic. He examined Sungjin twice a day, morning and evening, but trusting him was difficult. Whether due to presbyopia or not being fully sober, he'd look at Sungjin's face with murky eyes and nod, but he probably wasn't seeing anything clearly. He would feel for the pulse with a trembling hand, but his shaking fingers couldn't even find the pulse properly. "Excellent. Everything's fine." What exactly is fine? Could this man even be trusted? Sungjin looked at Edith, who was standing nearby. She sighed and answered, "Actually, Ninias primarily looks after the regular knights of the Pearl Palace. Your Highness had a separate physician originally, but according to Edith until recently, some wealthy imperial palace doctors, quite famous members of the Leora school, the most recognised school in the imperial capital, served as Morris's personal physicians. But when the prince fell ill with a fever and didn't receive proper treatment, they all fell out of the Holy Emperor's favour and were demoted. They were probably travelling through slums now, treating plague patients. If so, shouldn't they send a new doctor soon? How could they treat a prince who just came back to life like this?" Coo, Dr. Ninias, who had been quietly listening to Edith's story, suddenly let out a low laugh. "Isn't that exactly what they deserved? The Leora school is always spouting nonsense about fighting the plague on the front lines." Surprised by the cynical remark, Sungjin and Edith stared at him. The doctor, as if he'd accidentally said too much, looked even more startled than they did and quickly tried to cover it up. "Oh, of course, I deeply respect the teachings of the Leora school, the only tradition recognised by the Delcross Crusade." "Of course," the Demon King quickly added in Sungjin's head. "The old man is thinking that everything was bad, those Leora quacks." Well, even without being told, it was obvious from the doctor's expression that his talk of respect was total nonsense. It seemed like not just personal dislike, but genuine animosity toward the school itself. Sungjin had no choice but to ask, "Well, Dr. Ninias, which school are you from?" The doctor stared at Sungjin blankly for a moment. He seemed even more out of focus than usual, but Sungjin got the feeling that the old man was actually looking at him properly for the first time. After a moment of silence, Dr. Ninias slowly shook his head. "I'm afraid not, Your Highness. I'm just a worthless apothecary who picked up bits and pieces here and there. I was lucky enough to catch His Majesty's eye and get a decent job in my old age. I've never belonged to any school." "That's a lie," said the Demon King, but Sungjin had already figured out the doctor's true intentions. The old man's face was easy to read. "In any case, Your Highness, I don't think you need a daily examination anymore. You've fully recovered from the fever." The doctor hastily gathered his tools and stood up. "From now on, just focus on regaining your strength. Eat well and exercise. And, compared to ordinary people, The aura in your body seems quite weak. I think recovery will be faster if you make at least some effort to train your aura. He had only recently started examining Morres, and it was clear the old man didn't know much about the idiot third prince. Morris's real doctors would have never said such a thing. As soon as the doctor said that, Edith's eyes flashed and she stared at Sungjin. "Were you waiting for me to start throwing things?" Sungjin gave her a blank look, and she immediately made a sulky face. "My only pleasure." "Edith, are you a dog chasing a frisbee? Why are you looking for pleasure in catching flying dishes?" Anyway, even if the doctor hadn't recommended it, Sungjin had already been thinking about seriously exercising outdoors and watching his diet. "Edith, tell the kitchen to use less seasoning from now on. Ask for more salad without dressing. I don't mind eating things I wouldn't normally eat." He wasn't in a position to design a diet counting salt, carbs and protein, so he'd just have to pick and choose. How much did people here know about food components? From what he could tell, it was somewhere between medieval and modern. Edith didn't hide her surprise at the strange order, but Sungjin slowly shrugged and added, "And I want to go to the training ground. Can you take me?" The training ground at the Pearl Palace was originally built for Morris's private swordsmanship lessons. After he quit, it wasn't used for a while. Then the administrative officials appointed by the Queen kept it clean. At some point, the escort knights living in the Pearl Palace had turned it into their own personal training ground. But now, all the knights had stopped their training, gathered in a corner, and stood with their eyes wide, because the suddenly appeared Pig Prince had taken over the not very large gym. The prince wasn't walking or running, he was circling the gym at a moderate pace. What's gotten into him all of a sudden? The knights' gazes, watching the prince's massive body move around, weren't exactly friendly. Unlike the ladies in waiting with their almost military discipline, these knights had relatively little influence from the Queen. They often treated the prince rudely. Some were openly contemptuous, but Sungjin, who had only one goal, to build his stamina and learn aura, didn't care about them at all. Breathing heavily, he made a few laps and left, without even glancing at the knights, wiping his sweat with his sleeve. What the hell just happened? The knights looked at each other in confusion. Normally he'd be screaming at them for not bowing low enough, but this idiot just quietly exercised and left. The knights blinked but soon went back to their business, deciding that anything can happen in life, and this was just another whim. But the next day, and the day after that, the knights saw Morres again, walking around the training ground. "My stamina is absolute crap," Sungjin breathed heavily. Getting frustrated, he'd planned to build some muscle and strengthen his frame first, then do cardio once he'd lost a little weight. But he was already doing cardio at full effort, and he'd only done a few laps. His lungs felt like they were about to burst, his heart was pounding like crazy, and his whole body was soaked like he'd been caught in a downpour. At this rate, when would he ever build enough stamina to learn aura? The knights whispering in the corner with dissatisfied expressions were really starting to get on his nerves. Sweat dripping down his hair was stinging his eyes. He wiped his eyes in irritation, and suddenly a dry towel appeared in front of him. Without thinking, he took it and looked up. An elderly gentleman was looking at Sungjin with a smile. "Who is that?" The elderly man stood with several attendants. His hair was grey, but his back was straight, and his suit was neat, without a single button undone. Meeting Sungjin's eyes, the old man took a step back, pressed his right hand to his chest, and respectfully bowed his head. "Greetings, Your Highness." An old-fashioned gesture, right out of a textbook. The servants following him also bowed. Sungjin didn't know how to react, and just stared at him. The old man continued, looking slightly puzzled. "I heard the fever caused you to lose your memory, and I didn't visit you sooner. I apologize, Your Highness." He never lost his extremely respectful attitude toward the young prince. Sungjin felt a bit of respect for him and wiped his sweat with the towel. Seeing this, the old man smiled again, then slightly lowered his head and said, "My name is Louis Feltre, head chamberlain of the Imperial Palace. I assist His Majesty." Suddenly someone who looked like the final boss's right-hand man appeared. Sungjin's lips tightened for a moment, but the old man, not even noticing, continued in a cheerful voice as he took the sweaty towel back. "Not much time has passed since you woke up, and you're already training so hard. Well, just a warm-up. If the young prince is so valiant, shouldn't the knights of the Pearl Palace follow his example and become more diligent? This brings joy to the Holy Imperial family. A true blessing from Delcross." Sungjin looked around with a dumbfounded expression. "No, old man. Look at the atmosphere when you say things like that. Look at those knights. Don't you think they're about to start shooting lasers?" The Demon King clicked his tongue. "Wow, this guy. Is he serious? Is he some kind of bootlicker from another world?" But despite that, the head chamberlain had a face like a proud grandfather looking at a wonderful grandson. Sungjin looked away and cleared his throat. Lewis, so what brings you here?" Sungjin, not used to treating an elderly person like a servant, spoke awkwardly, but the head chamberlain didn't seem to mind. When the prince lost consciousness from the fever, His Majesty the Holy Emperor was very worried. He put aside state affairs, came personally to the Pearl Palace, and then, refusing the aid of healing priests, used his own immense holy power to finally defeat the terrible fever. "I heard something about that." Sungjin didn't know how much of that was true, but he decided to nod along. Fortunately, the prince has risen from his sickbed in good health, but His Majesty has not yet been reassured. He ordered me to carefully assess your condition before the audience. Well, that's certainly something to be thankful for. If the prince wishes, His Majesty would come personally to the Pearl Palace at a convenient time. "What, come where?" Seeing Sungjin's bewildered expression, Louis quickly added an explanation. "Ah, you seem to have forgotten about the regular audiences. Since ancient times, the Holy Emperor has dined with the princes and princesses at least once a week. Does the ruler of the country actually have time for that?" For Sungjin, who wanted to avoid meeting the Holy Emperor as much as possible, this was bad news. As you know, His Majesty cares deeply for his children, and until now, audiences have never been cancelled unless there were important events in the Empire or unavoidable schedule conflicts. However, in the case of Prince Morres, there have been many instances where scheduled meetings were cancelled on the day itself. For some reason, the prince would often send word that his condition had suddenly worsened right before the audience. As a result, in recent times, the Holy Emperor has often learned of the prince's intentions in advance and come to the Pearl Palace himself. He told me to ask what will happen this time. "Morres, you crazy bastard! You frequently broke promises with the Holy Emperor?" Sungjin broke out in a cold sweat. Suddenly a person, called the head chamberlain, appeared and announced that sooner or later they would be meeting the final boss. On top of that, it turned out that this world-class troublemaker used to brazenly stand up the final boss without any fear. Sungjin was frozen for a moment. "Your Highness?" He was so flustered that his pupils were shaking, and his words kept coming out wrong. Desperation, the feeling that he couldn't lose even more points in front of someone who might be the final boss, finally made Sungjin put together a complete sentence. "This time, I'll come myself. Thank you for your concern. That's my answer. Please pass it along. Someone like the Holy Emperor couldn't be ordered to come and go as he pleased." Sungjin wished he knew how Morres used to communicate, and whether this matched proper etiquette. But strangely, the Demon King, who usually chattered non-stop, was silent now. Fortunately, Sungjin's answer seemed to please the Chamberlain. If the prince is behaving so admirably, how pleased His Majesty must be. I will do my utmost to ensure the audience goes smoothly. I will soon send someone to the Pearl Palace with a message, so please take care of yourself. Louis performed another polite gesture and left the training ground with a composed expression. However, Sungjin's keen eye, trained by years of combat, noticed that the head chamberlain's cheekbones twitched and rose slightly. What did I do that made him so happy? The more he thought about it, the more he realized how stupid Morres must have been before. Sungjin, catching a glimpse of the Chamberlain's group, walking away with light steps, sighed in relief and turned around. Because of the unexpected encounter, the break had lasted longer than planned. He decided to start walking around the training ground again. He needed to do at least a few more laps than yesterday to be sure he was making progress. Of course, he hadn't even finished half a lap before he was out of breath, and his firm resolve was humiliated. The knights, gathered in groups of 2 or 3 in the corner of the training ground, didn't hide their displeasure when the prince, whom they'd expected to leave soon, started his rounds again. Some, showing their irritation, left the hall, while others sat down and pretended to clean their equipment, occasionally throwing contemptuous glances at Sungjin. Until now, Sungjin hadn't paid much attention to whether they were being rude or not, but the constant hostility was starting to get on his nerves. Still, he needed to deal with the knights from time to time. How long had he been walking around the training ground like this? Gasping and staggering, Sungjin took a few more steps and then collapsed to the floor. His vision went dark. He felt like dying. He hadn't thought it would be this hard, and he'd spent weeks fighting monsters, sleeping on the front lines. As he was gasping for air, a small voice quietly spoke to him, as if slithering inside. "Hey, so you're going to meet after all? The Holy Emperor?" At first he couldn't understand what was happening because his head was foggy from lack of oxygen. Come to think of it, had this guy been strangely quiet earlier? "I guess I have to. What were you doing? Did you get any information from the Chamberlain? It was so quiet I thought you'd finally disappeared." The Demon King, strangely, didn't react to these words. I found out, he replied in a strangely hollow voice. The head Chamberlain turned out to be someone with resistance to soul touching. "It's not easy, so I had to focus." Sungjin tilted his head. "Resistance to touching? You never mentioned anything like that before. Is the head Chamberlain a priest?" "Are you crazy? Touch divine power? I'd rather try to kill myself again." According to the Demon King, touching a soul was like talking to a sleeping person. When a soul isn't in a crisis or stressful situation, it's usually defenseless, half asleep. If you send a mental wave with what you want to ask, the relevant memories surface from the unconscious. This convenient method had its limits. The Demon King couldn't read memories directly from Sungjin's soul, and he didn't even know the exact reason. A simple, relaxed guy like you is secretly not so simple. What? Souls with strong mental or divine power couldn't be touched. In the case of someone with strong mental defenses, like a soul in a state of extreme tension, the resistance to mental waves is very high. And if the Demon King's soul touched a soul with divine power, it would completely disappear upon trying to connect. In that sense, the head Chamberlain has a very strong ego defense. He's a strict person with strong self-control. Someone like that doesn't easily give up the memories I need, and his mental barrier is so strong that it's hard to break through without damaging the soul. Despite this, the Demon King tried to gather as much information as possible. Sooner or later, he would have to appear before the most powerful priest on the continent and await his verdict. Would the Holy Emperor be able to recognize the remnants of another world and the demon world possessing his son's body? So, did you find out anything? Unfortunately, there was no useful information. That old man turned out to be a very important figure in the palace. More important than I thought. The information he possesses is so vast that I couldn't focus on what I wanted to find out. I tried to get some sense of the Holy Emperor, but his perception is very biased. So I don't really trust it. You don't trust it? The information from the head Chamberlain, who serves right beside the Holy Emperor? At Sungjin's question, the Demon King's soul seemed to stir slightly. If it had a physical form, he might have sighed. The head Chamberlain's loyalty to the imperial family is indeed great. He's even friendly to Morres, whom everyone criticizes as a good-for-nothing. And his faith in the Holy Emperor is so firm that, to put it mildly, it's devotion. But in a bad way, it could be called fanaticism. Is that enough to call it fanaticism? Yes. He thinks the Holy Emperor is almost omnipotent, you know? Is that reliable information? Sungjin blinked. Omnipotent. I don't think he's even clearly aware of it himself. He's just pleased with himself for giving his loyalty to such a good holy emperor. But, in his subconscious, the holy emperor is by no means an ordinary person. He firmly believes that he is the greatest heir of all time and the undoubted representative of the main god. But you know what's really funny? He himself doesn't really believe in God. He's not very interested in religion itself. What do you do with that? He doesn't believe in God, but he believes in God's representative? That's why it's funny. Isn't that a complete contradiction? But that meticulous guy doesn't know it himself. How far can respect, admiration, and trust in a single person go? Sungjin stood up silently. His breathing suddenly calmed. In the light breeze, his heated body quickly cooled, and goosebumps ran down his skin. I don't think this is just a matter of strong or weak divine power. The representative of God. Since Sungjin was close to being an atheist, he didn't think there existed an omnipotent person who actually represented God. It was just that the head chamberlain subconsciously believed the holy emperor might possess something special. For example, what if the holy emperor had the same ability as the demon king, the soul touch? Wouldn't people around him then consider him omnipotent? Whatever it was, one thing was certain. It looks like we're going to be caught. Do you have any solution? Maybe we just break the promise like Morres did. That's a temporary measure. Before, Morres didn't even show his face, so the Holy Emperor came all the way to the Pearl Palace himself. What will you do if they come here again? What if we run away from the Imperial Palace? I don't know if I'll have time to prepare, and how can I do it with such low stamina? With this body, I'll be noticed wherever I go. We're doomed. Is that all you have to say? Feeling the Demon King's soul trembling inside his head, Sungjin did his best to suppress his growing anxiety. Before evening, a servant was sent from the main palace to announce the mealtime. Unsurprisingly, the Pearl Palace was turned upside down. How long had it been since that fat prince had gone out for an official visit? Hearing the news, Queen Elizabeth brought many ladies-in-waiting from the Ruby Palace and started her attack early in the morning. Soon the entire Pearl Palace was buzzing under the Queen's direction. Sungjin, who had planned to spend the whole morning at the training ground since the meeting was in the afternoon, was caught by the ladies-in-waiting with solemn expressions before he even left his room. With a bewildered look on his face, he was taken to the bath and cleaned, and so awkwardly, in front of a lady-in-waiting. As he resisted and protested, Edith, with a determined face, poured perfume over his head. "Calm down, Your Highness. Maybe we can finish quickly and have a snack. Are you bathing a cat right now?" He stared at her in confusion, and she tilted her head. Before, this used to work fine. Before, he'd wondered how she managed to handle the temper of Morres, who was a complete jerk. Turns out they treated him like an animal that couldn't communicate at all. "Get out. I can take a bath myself. While you were sick, I always took care of you. Why are you shy now?" That's what she said. Since Sungjin wasn't going to back down, Edith's expression suddenly darkened. "Come on, Your Highness. Please cooperate. You know how much the Queen will harass me if there's even the slightest delay in preparation." The Queen's visits had been increasing lately, and it seemed this Iron Maid was stressed without even realizing it. Why do the Ruby Palace maids have to come to the Pearl Palace? This isn't even their palace. As if saying, "They're useless. Foo-foo," Edith laughed with a creepy voice. It was doubly scary because she was an aura user. Sungjin quickly took a bath and got out, urged on by her fierce determination. This time, the Queen's ladies-in-waiting lined up, holding very professional-looking beauty tools. Soon his hair was cut, his nails were trimmed, his eyebrows were shaped, and the fuss began. "Ah, look at this beautiful hair. It looks just like the Queen's. Oh, you've lost so much weight. Your facial features have become so sharp." Don't lie, you guys. This is just a regular audience. What is even going on? Tugging here, pinching there. Such chaos had never happened before. Sungjin, worn out as if he'd been through a storm, tried to sigh in relief, but it wasn't over yet. From one end of the room to the end of the corridor, a whole procession of maids lined up, both hands occupied with clothes and accessories. Sungjin turned pale. How am I going to get through this? How long is this going to take? But the Demon King, who would normally be laughing at Sungjin like crazy, was in a strange state. Fu, the one closer to the end, should be a normal colour. Of course, fu. Fortunately, Queen Elizabeth's taste was quite noble. He was bothered for a while by clothes with numerous ruffles that kept appearing and disappearing, but in the end, from a modern person's point of view, Sungjin looked quite decent. The dark blue uniform, embroidered with silver thread, looked neat at first glance, but if you looked closely, you could see how much money, skill, and time had been spent on it. The clothes were loose enough, and the ladies in waiting spent some time adjusting them. Of course, no matter how they dressed him up, he was still a pig in a fancy package. Sungjin sighed inwardly, but even so, his appearance wasn't quite satisfactory in the Queen's eyes. "Oh, Morres, how can you look so magnificent?" The soulless praises from the ladies in waiting never stopped. "You are extremely noble. Isn't it thanks to the dark clothes that the prince's magnificent hair stands out even more? What about the cuffs and brooches? How well they match the prince's grey eyes like jewels. Ah, this is beauty at first sight. You're going too far." A carriage arrived on time from the main palace. He said he'd handle things smoothly, but the head chamberlain turned out to be more meticulous than he thought. As he got into the carriage accompanied by Edith, 2 escort knights followed behind. The imperial carriage is so magnificent. Riding in this definitely feels different from riding in a car, doesn't it? Oh God, are you a child? Don't you realize this is a carriage to the underworld? Shut up. But soon after leaving the Pearl Palace, the Demon King shuddered and called out to Sungjin. "Hey, I have a bad feeling about this." Sungjin, who had been sitting comfortably, tensed up. "What? Why? Look outside, you idiot. Isn't the main palace still far? But the surroundings are already filled with an ominous light." When he lifted the curtain and looked out the window, a vast view of the imperial garden spread before him. On a huge green lawn, whose boundaries weren't even visible, a road wide enough for 3 carriages to pass side by side stretched out. At the end of the road stood the majestic and beautiful main palace, gleaming white, and countless people filled the large garden in front of the main palace. Knights looking around warily, aristocrats in groups of 2 or 3, clerks hurrying back and forth with stacks of papers, and a huge number of priests dressed in gleaming white uniforms. About half the crowd was dressed in white robes. On the white robes were, from simple to magnificent, embroidered with gold thread, was always engraved the main god's emblem of the sun and sword. It dawned on Sungjin, this place was a den of priests. "Ah, I was mistaken. I thought it would be fine if I hid well inside your body, but I was wrong. My soul hurts like it's being pricked by needles, just from being near those who possess divine power." Sungjin, made nervous by the Demon King's fuss, swallowed without even realizing it. It seemed like any moment those priests might recognize Sungjin and rush at them, shouting that he was an evil spirit who had possessed the prince's body. "We should have just run away when we had the chance." As the miserable Demon King was lamenting, the carriage stopped. He had arrived at the main entrance of the palace, the residence of the Holy Emperor. Carefully stepping down from the carriage, Sungjin was greeted by a group of knights in luxurious uniforms. "We greet Prince Morres. Hail to the 3rd prince!" The knights raised their swords in unison and struck the ground, then respectfully lowered their heads. It was a polished courtesy that was nowhere near the level of the resident knights at the Pearl Palace. Sungjin's mouth fell open involuntarily. Wow, that was cool. Watching the knights bow their heads, one of them, apparently the leader, approached Sungjin and smiled gently. "Congratulations on your recovery, Your Highness. From now on, we the Imperial Guards will serve you." He was a handsome man with honey blonde hair. His trained, solid body was intimidating, but his small round eyes made his overall impression strangely soft. Sungjin didn't know how to react and just stared blankly at him. The man's smile faded, but as if he'd been warned in advance, he quickly composed himself, pressed his right hand to his chest, and politely bowed his head. "My name is Masan Klanos. I am a member of the Imperial Guard and captain of the Second Knight's Order. I am very glad to see you in good health." It seemed this man was personally acquainted with Morres. Well, nothing to be done. Sungjin smiled shyly, and Masan smiled gently back at him, then turned and began walking ahead. Apparently, he guessed that the prince might not know the geography of the main palace at all. Thinking it was lucky to have someone quick-witted nearby, Sungjin followed him. But as soon as he passed through the tall arched entrance, the Demon King let out a pained sound. "Ugh, it's stuffy. I feel like my soul is being crushed." "Why, are those people paladins too?" "No, they seem to be ordinary knights. That's not it. It's just that this place is unusually full of holy power. The moment I leave this body, I feel like I'll be crushed to death. Ugh." After that, the Demon King fell completely silent. Sungjin called out to him several times, but the presence of his soul was extremely weak, and now it was hard to even feel it. He'd decided to pretend he was entering a boss dungeon, but he hadn't expected the Demon King to be knocked out so quickly. Hiding his agitation, Sungjin slowly entered the main palace's entrance hall, following the night guides. The Holy Emperor's office was at the end of the second floor of the main palace. The wide corridor was relatively quiet, but from time to time, people in strange robes, apparently high-ranking clergy, passed by. Every time Sungjin got nervous, but fortunately, they just stepped aside and greeted him politely, with no reaction. It seems the priests don't realize the soul has changed. Maybe we were worried for nothing, Sungjin thought with some relief. But there was no answer from the Demon King. Had he not endured the priest's energy and died? Sungjin had dreamed of completely destroying the Demon King. He was the main culprit behind the destruction of Sungjin's world, the enemy who made him burn to death in Gehenna's flames. It was just that until now, he had no choice but to rely on him, and his existence was so insignificant that he just left him alone. But at the thought that the Demon King might have actually disappeared, Sungjin felt a strange sense of emptiness. "Your Eminence Cardinal Benitus." These thoughts didn't last long, because Masign, who was walking ahead, suddenly stopped and lowered his head. In front of them stood a thin old man, poking his head out from behind the kneeling knight commander's shoulder. He was a peculiar old man, with a long hooked nose and a downturned mouth. Despite his small and frail frame, his tall priest's hat and magnificent robe embroidered with gold and silver gave him a rather dignified appearance. A cardinal. He must be a high-ranking clergyman. The old man straightened up, stared at Morres for a while, then slightly bowed his head to the knight commander. "There's no need to be so polite with me, Sir Masign." Contrary to his initial stern impression, his tone was quite polite. Then he nodded in Sungjin's direction. "Your Highness the Prince." What? Something's off. He greeted the escort knight first and then pretended to notice the prince? And just a nod? The old man's behaviour was strange even for someone who knew nothing about Delcross's culture. Sungjin's eyes narrowed. Masign seemed to notice this too, and looked anxiously at the prince. "So, what are you doing in the main palace?" This was a question directed not at the knight commander, who always stood guard at the main palace, but at Masign himself. The cardinal was ignoring Sungjin. Truly, the polite old man turned out to be quite a jerk. Just as Sungjin was trying to figure out how far this would go, Masign, who'd had enough, stepped forward and warned the cardinal in a low voice. "Your Eminence Cardinal, you are standing before His Highness the Prince. Please show some respect." "Humph." Cardinal Benitus made a sound that was impossible to tell whether it was a cough or a snort, then turned to Sungjin and met his gaze. His posture was arrogant. Hands behind his back, stomach pushed out. "Yes, I heard you've been having a lot of trouble lately. Fortunately, you're still in good health." Not only did the old man speak, but he also narrowed his eyes and looked Sungjin up and down. Massane's face hardened at such blatantly rude behaviour, but the cardinal's eyes suddenly widened. "Ah? Wait a moment. No, Prince?" And suddenly he started approaching Sungjin with a demented expression. Sungjin realised something was wrong. What is this?" With a slightly puzzled look, as if he'd discovered something strange, the old man suddenly reached out his hand towards Sungjin. Soon his hand, surrounded by a strong white light, approached Sungjin's face like a rake. Even to Sungjin, who was unfamiliar with it, this light didn't seem favourable. This might be divine power. He was seeing divine power for the first time since coming to this world. His heart started beating faster, and various thoughts raced through his head. Had he recognised Sungjin's soul, or had he noticed the Demon King? What would happen if he touched him with divine power like this? Would he be expelled from this body? If he wanted to live as a prince of the Holy Empire, things like this would happen often in the future. For now, it might be good to experience divine power firsthand as an experiment, right? But you're just reaching out to grab me? Sungjin couldn't help but frown. He didn't intend to argue with every little thing an old man did, but wasn't this going too far, trying to touch the prince as he pleased? Sungjin, who almost brushed the cardinal's hand away, reflexively tried to stay steady. The old man's bony fingers seemed fragile with the slightest wrong move, so fortunately, before he could start beating up the old man, Massane quickly blocked his path. "Stop, Sir Benitus!" The old man, pausing for a moment, looked at the Knight Commander with a puzzled expression. "Do you realise what you're doing, Sir Massane?" It was clearly an accusation, but the Knight Commander was unyielding. "No high-ranking clergyman may approach the prince. The cardinal is no exception. Don't you find that strange? These are His Majesty's orders, for the prince's protection." For a moment, cold air flowed between them. The cardinal, who had been looking at Massane with sad eyes for a while, opened his mouth as if lamenting. But the Knight Commander showed no signs of backing down. "Who exactly are you protecting from a priest who serves God?" The cardinal shook his head and took a step back. "Sir Massane has always been like this. Why are you so blind to his words?" "Then I'll see you again, Sir Massane." He glanced at Sungjin and shook his head. It was more like a snort than a greeting. "Your Highness the Prince." Not seeing a reaction from Sungjin, he hurriedly walked past. Massane silently watched the cardinal's back, but the corners of his mouth twisted strangely. It was impossible to tell whether he was laughing or crying, but only for a moment. The Knight Commander, quickly returning to his polite smile, bowed his head to Sungjin. "We've been delayed a bit, Your Highness. Let's hurry." Their behaviour seemed a bit strange to Sungjin, but he quickly calmed his nerves and obediently followed Massane. It's fine. He had important business ahead, meeting the Holy Emperor. What did this have to do with anything? "Oh, Your Highness Morres, how magnificent you look. His Majesty will be very pleased." As they approached the office door, Head Chamberlain Louis, waiting outside, approached with open arms. Sungjin doubted such an excessive reaction, but Louis immediately caught himself and quickly corrected. "Oh, forgive me, Your Highness. You're so obedient and courteous that this servant momentarily forgot his manners." There was a soft-looking nobleman standing in the corner who couldn't control his emotions. Sungjin smiled bitterly and asked, Louis? As you know, I can't remember much. Is there anything I should be careful about when meeting Father? Sorry to cause you more trouble." Louis's face lit up. If the Demon King had read his mind, he would have said, "You've asked such a profound question. This Lord Morres has become so worthy." Thanks to Morres, who had thoroughly trashed his own reputation, Sungjin could do pretty much anything within reason. I assumed the prince would be concerned about court etiquette. Fortunately, His Majesty doesn't care much about external formalities. It's enough to address him as Your Majesty, and that will show proper respect. It seemed the Holy Emperor wasn't particularly strict. Just as Sungjin felt relieved, the head chamberlain turned and called out loudly to the door. "Your Majesty, Prince Morres has arrived." Now, into the boss's room. The office door slowly opened, and Sungjin entered, trying to calm his pounding heart. In the worst case, I'll just get thrown out of this body. After meeting Cardinal Benedictus, this fact had etched itself into his heart, and his initial anxiety had significantly diminished. Now, curiosity filled that space. What kind of being was this Holy Emperor, called the representative of God? When he tried to picture him, he thought of the Pope in his tiara, whom he'd seen on TV before his world was destroyed. That person was an old man, but since the Holy Emperor had a teenage son, he should be younger, right? Maybe he looked a lot like Morres? Was he a strong man? Or more like a typical weak priest? At least it didn't seem like he was pushed aside by age. Right now, he and the Demon King were bickering and acting childish, but despite that, Sungjin was well into his 60s when he died on Earth. As he entered the room, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity, the first thing he noticed was a lavishly set table in the centre of the room. He thought it might suit Morris's taste. Similar desserts were often served at the Pearl Palace. Beyond the table was a large desk with magnificent carvings. Looking at the stacked documents and scattered books, he felt this was a place for official business. And the Holy Emperor was standing in front of the large window overlooking the terrace. Sungjin's eyes widened involuntarily. The Holy Emperor, is that him? He was a well-groomed young man. No matter how you looked at his soft features and youthful face, he didn't seem like the father of a teenage son. With his short cropped black hair, simple casual clothes and slim build, he looked more like a well-trained swordsman than a priest. The man called a priest even wore a long sword at his waist. No tall cardinal's hat, no papal tiara, only a magnificent white robe draped over his shoulders, like a cloak hinted that he was not an ordinary clergyman. If one had to find a resemblance to Morris, it would be in his grey eyes, which caught the light and shone with a mysterious silver glow. Those warm eyes were looking at Sungjin. Could this really be the father of that fat guy? Ah, father? Oh no, he'd been asked to address him as Your Majesty. He was so flustered that he blurted out the name that was on his mind. The Holy Emperor tilted his head. He might have been puzzled, but his cold face showed no expression. It was impossible to guess what he was thinking. Sungjin quickly corrected himself and lowered his head. Your Majesty. The Holy Emperor opened his mouth. A clear, low voice said, Father is acceptable too. You clearly have no memories of the past. Yes, that's right. Sungjin slipped up. Actually, the soul had changed, but since he was standing before the Holy Emperor, lying felt a bit awkward. Fortunately, the Holy Emperor replied briefly, as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual. Good. Then he quickly walked towards Sungjin. His long robe swayed, emitting a soft light depending on the angle. Involuntarily mesmerized by this movement, Sungjin didn't have time to react before the Holy Emperor, now a step closer, stopped. Up close, he was taller than expected. Sungjin blinked. He didn't know how to react and just stared at him with wide eyes. But the Holy Emperor, looking at Sungjin with an unreadable expression, suddenly raised his hand and extended it toward his head. It all happened so fast that he couldn't react. His palms, involuntarily clenched into fists, were covered in cold sweat. Had he noticed too? Was he going to die like this? Sungjin closed his eyes, anticipating the end. The hand touched his head. Nothing happened. No, rather than nothing. A familiar low voice sounded in his head. Demon King. The presence of the Demon King, which had been so weak it was undetectable, suddenly grew stronger, and at that moment a sharp vibration was transmitted. It felt like his soul was being stretched. What? Wait a minute, huh? Are you alive? What happened? The Demon King didn't react to Sungjin's words at all. Maybe he didn't know himself, because the surprise and confusion he was feeling didn't pass without a trace. Huh? What is this? Oh, Kia! The Demon King's soul suddenly made a strange sound, as if frightened by something, and then fell silent again. This time, Sungjin sighed in relief, because he could clearly feel his presence. At the same time, one side of his head felt calmer. What did the Holy Emperor do? Did he notice the Demon King's existence? If he noticed, why didn't he get rid of him? But he couldn't afford to think any more, because the Holy Emperor, lowering his hand from the top of Sungjin's head, ordered in a calm tone, "Sit down," and the two mismatched father and son sat down facing the table of snacks in front of them. Sungjin sits down, stares silently at the Holy Emperor, trying to read his intentions. The Holy Emperor raises his teacup. His face is completely blank. He sets the cup down. "Don't you like it? You usually enjoyed the food," Sungjin calls out carefully. "Father?" "Yes, Morres." Sungjin grabs a cookie, takes a bite. Tastier than expected. He samples different desserts. The Holy Emperor watches him silently. Occasionally sips his tea. "How have you been lately?" "Exercising. Planning to lose weight." "Good idea. I heard you've been going to the training ground." "Yes, starting with light exercises, gradually increasing the time. Don't overdo it." "I know. Later, maybe I'll read some books." "Books?" The Holy Emperor's eyes widen, first emotion of the entire conversation. "I used to stay away from books. After coming back to life, I started thinking, why do I live? What am I doing? I want to learn about religion, about death and the afterlife, about God and the soul." "You're interested in that? The first person you got expelled was the theology teacher." "Father, I have a question." "What is it?" "Can you see the human soul?" The Holy Emperor answers softly. "I can see the soul clearly. A priest does not doubt its existence. As a prince of the Holy Empire, you should not doubt either." "What does a soul look like?" "It looks the same as before birth. The soul is influenced by the body until death." "What does my soul look like?" The Holy Emperor is silent. Then, "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I lived a wasteful life. Has my soul gained weight too?" The Holy Emperor stares at him with empty eyes. "To find out, you'd have to see your soul leave your body. Do you want to die?" The audience time flies by. Sungjin talks non-stop. "I was stretching. Edith came running in scared. Thought I'd flipped over and couldn't get up." "Really?" "When I grab something for exercises, she comes running. Thinks I'm about to start throwing things." "I see. The tea is delicious, better than the Melbourne Edith brewed the other day. That one tasted like bile. This tea is also Melbourne." "Really?" "I want to learn aura. Don't know where to start." The Holy Emperor rests his chin on his hand. "You need to learn swordsmanship or spear techniques first. There are training methods for specific skills." "Ah, the sequence method?" "Yes. The foundation of aura is learning levels sequentially, but after a certain point, the classification becomes meaningless. Where the heart goes, the aura follows." "How did you learn, Father?" The Holy Emperor rubs his chin, looks slightly embarrassed. "Just naturally. I don't remember. I moved with my sword as usual. Later, my teacher said it was aura." Sungjin's jaw drops. "As a child, you didn't want to study, but you liked swordsmanship. No matter how much you trained, you couldn't feel aura. Eventually, you gave up." "I see. I think you'll manage now." The carriage returns to the Pearl Palace. Sungjin is in a good mood. Head Chamberlain, Louis, is in tears. "It's been years since you two spent time together so happily." Sungjin asks to resume swordsmanship lessons. The Holy Emperor replies, "I will send someone suitable." Sungjin bounces with joy. The carriage creaks. "Your Highness, are you all right?" "Everything's fine, just slipped off the seat." "Nice job. Are you a child? I'm embarrassed to watch." "This is what I do when I'm alone." "You okay? Why so quiet?" The impact was too strong. Need time to recover. The Demon King trembles. The main palace is a terrifying place. The divine power almost crushed me. If he hadn't blocked it at that moment. Blocked it? He created a barrier around our souls. The divine power isn't as painful now. But the Demon King pauses, then, in an empty voice, "My soul can no longer touch other souls." "What? Soul touch is impossible now? I tested it on the coachman and the escort knight. Nothing works. So now you're useless. Don't treat me like trash." Sungjin looks out the window. The ivory walls of the Pearl Palace appear in the distance. "We survived. He turned out better than I thought." The Demon King snorts. "A good person? You're naive. When people are ignorant, their hair turns into a field of flowers. Oh, he's a monster. How can such a thing exist? Monster? You think someone I, the great demon king of Gehenna, cannot measure, is an ordinary person. But he was kind to us? That monster knows who you are. Why would he leave an evil spirit who stole his son's body alive? He's looking for the real Morres' soul, and the only clues are us. He'll keep watching. Calm down. He's scary. He's so scary. The carriage enters the Pearl Palace. Dusk gathers. In the evening, an administrative official announces, starting today, the restrictions on visiting the Pearl Palace are partially lifted.